Hey Mama, welcome to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gibbs, wife, mama of 3, and doctor of the PhD kind. On this podcast, we talk honestly about high achievement, burnout, and what it looks like to lead well across home, work, and self. So if you're an ambitious mother scholar who's quietly exhausted by the pace you've been keeping and starting to realize that survival isn't the same as success, this podcast is for you. Mrs. Mummy PhD began during my own PhD journey as a wife and mama. Today, as a postdoctoral scholarly mama working across 2 leadership roles, this work has evolved. It's no longer just about finishing the PhD well, it's about creating sustainable ways of learning, leading, and living at any stage of your journey without losing yourself in the process. If you're ready to move from survival to restoration, you're in the right place. Let's begin. These are our journeys of becoming. Hey Mama, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for sticking around, still tuning in, even though we've been on a bit of an extended break. So let me just start off today's episode by saying Happy New Year. Am I even allowed to say that mid-January? I hope so. Anyway, Happy New Year. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas and all the things that you would have done in the last 6 months that we've been on break on the podcast. I hope today's episode will explain a little bit of that. I didn't intend to be on a break for that long, but it was necessary. It gave me the space I needed to come back to this podcast refreshed, restored, and ready to serve as before. And so I just wanted to say that the focus of today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We're talking about burnout in high achieving mothers and talking about moving from survival to restoration. Because burnout in high achieving mothers doesn't usually arrive with lots of flashing lights and warning signs. More often, it creeps up very quietly, disguised as ambition and resilience and responsibility and the pressure to keep going. And as a mother scholar, as a leader, I know how easy it is to slip into that survival mode while you're trying to succeed in very intellectually demanding work, plus juggling family life at the same time. And so this space, and obviously this evolving work of Mrs. Mummy PhD, because we're moving the focus a little bit, exists because success built without sustainability isn't success at all. It's survival. And too many of us in this academic, postdoctoral, predoctoral, doctoral phase of our journeys are living there without even realizing it. So I am here with a heart full of mixed emotions, but thankfully more good ones than not, because for probably the better part of almost 2.5 years, right up until July last year, I was showing up in your podcast feed every single week. That is 100 and actually more than, because we're on episode 124. So over 120 conversations about the beautiful, messy, exhausting, and inspiring work of navigating scholarly life while raising a family. We've talked about time and energy management. We've talked about self-doubt. We've talked about imposter syndrome. We've talked about all the milestones and the wins, the micro and the macro wins, and all the moments that only we can really truly understand as scholarly mamas. And I think it was one of the most, if I'm honest, it was one of the most consistent and joyful parts of this journey for me. Being able to be here, connect with you and share my insights and experiences and have others come onto the show and share their insights and experiences. But it was also a huge commitment of my time, energy, the hours of planning the episodes, preparing the episodes, recording the episodes, editing the episodes, and just showing up emotionally and being present here on the show. I think it has been joyful and enjoyable, but it's also been a huge commitment. And then life became really full. Life became really, really full. But before we talk about how life became really full, let's take a walk down memory lane. So, as you know, Mrs. Mummy PhD began in the thick of my own doctoral journey. So this was during a season where I often felt like the exception to the rule, the odd one out. And I was pursuing my PhD as a wife and as a mother. And at the same time, I felt like there were very few visible spaces that really acknowledged that reality, honestly. Much of what I encountered assumed a certain level of like singular focus, focusing on the task, pursuing the goals, a certain degree of even like flexibility in what I could and couldn't do. And this notion of self-sacrifice that simply did not reflect my reality, right? And so I created this space because I knew that I couldn't be the only ambitious mother navigating scholarship alongside family responsibility and identity and all the things. And I wanted to name that experience, not to complain about it, but to normalize it, right? And to create a space where other mother scholars could feel less alone, less invisible, and more understood as whole people, as whole women, not fragmented ones. And so in many ways, Mrs. Mummy PhD was born from a place of survival, from this determination to keep going, to make it work, to hold multiple worlds together all at once. And for a long time, that focus was really important. It was necessary for me to focus in that way. It helped me, and it helped many of you as well, to stay the course through these demanding seasons of study and early transitions in our careers. Fast forward to today, however, and I think this is the kind of crux of the matter, that the context has shifted a little bit. So I'm now postdoctoral, more seasoned as an author, blogger, podcaster, and coach, and also carrying different responsibilities. So including multiple leadership roles within my career alongside family life. And I feel like that has shifted the focus a little bit for Mrs. Mummy PhD. So let's talk about the burnout. Let's talk about when life quietly becomes too much, because between working full-time across not one, but two new and demanding leadership roles over the past 13 months and holding everything together at home, something had to give. Because even as high-achieving mothers, our children, I'm telling you, these little ones, they do not care about our workloads, meetings, deadlines, but they do care about snacks. They care about cuddles. They care about our presence. They care about us showing up as ourselves. And while I am deeply grateful for the opportunities that have come my way after completing my PhD, I began to realize something really important. You see, the PhD wasn't even the hardest part of the journey. And I know that sounds surprising in some way, but it wasn't even the hardest part. It was just the beginning of a new chapter of challenges of a different kind. In fact, for me, it felt even harder because when you're pre-PhD or when you're actually doing the PhD, those boundaries, they seem clearer somehow, right? But the pressures don't go away when you graduate. In fact, expectations get even higher, goals become even bigger. And so it's easy to get stuck into the trap of pushing harder, pursuing the next project, the next grant, the next award, the next fellowship, the next thing, and navigating the need to keep proving yourself. The temptation for all these things was so enticing, but I knew that if I kept pushing at the pace that I'd been going, burnout would win. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, the way it so often does. And amidst all of that, I was reminded that life is way too short to lose sight of the bigger picture. And so this is what I mean when I say that success without sustainability is just survival, because the exhaustion didn't arrive with the flashing warning signs. And that's no surprise, as burnout in high-achieving mothers like us is often silent. It crept in subtly, unassumingly, until one day I realized I was on the brink of losing myself in the pursuit of all of this, because it was actually here in the midst of this quote unquote successful season that burnout made itself known. And slowly, the cumulative cost of overdoing it, overfunctioning, constant striving, it became harder to ignore. And that's the uncomfortable truth, that sometimes even with the best intentions, we don't notice how much we're carrying until we're already carrying way too much. So I thank God for the self-awareness, the wake-up call, all of that allowed me to spot that a change was needed immediately. I knew I didn't want to model that kind of success for my children, and I certainly did not want to continue teaching that, even unintentionally, through Mrs. Mummy PhD. So in July last year, I made a really tough decision and I paused on a few things. I began to say no to some opportunities. I stepped back from certain things that I loved and I stopped showing up on my podcast. Not because I didn't care, but because I did. And this wasn't about self-care in the glossy, superficial sense either. This was purposeful self-leadership. So this is not the kind that pushes harder or proves resilience through, pushing more and endurance, but the kind rooted in discernment, boundaries, and responsibility for how I lead my energy, my time, myself. The kind that asks what actually matters in this season and is willing to honor that, even when it means stepping back, doing less, or even disappointing expectations, disappointing others. And what hit me in that moment wasn't that I needed, a complete overhaul of everything. It was that I actually had lost something that I'd previously had. And it was that I'd lost something that just became buried and became hidden beneath all of the achievement and pursuit and what I now call the price of the chase or the price of the climb. And when I reflect on what it was that I had, it was that self-leadership. It's the same kind of self-leadership that allowed me to finish my PhD well while I was juggling marriage, motherhood, work life, all of that without burning out. So self-leadership doesn't always feel comfortable. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but it can create the space needed to breathe, to rest, to recalibrate so that you can lead again with intention. It's not indulgent. It's not escapist. It's not having your head in the clouds. None of that. It's grounded. It's purposeful. It's sustainable. And so once I was aware of what was happening, I took time away from the podcast to enjoy a slower pace of life. Did some inner work, clarified my values, my goals, the routines that I needed to support this season that I am in right now. And gradually that clarity began to come back. And if I'm honest, it's still a work in progress, as most things are. But this is why Mrs. Mummy PhD is now evolving. Not because the original mission wasn't true, but it's going even deeper. So if you've been here a while, you will know that we never glorified grind culture anyway, or this kind of pushing through at all costs kind of rhetoric. But now I want to give myself even more permission to speak openly about what matters most to me in this postdoctoral season. And that is restoration, sustainability, and leading ourselves first as scholarly mamas. Because what I've come to realize is that the transition that I'm experiencing right now isn't new. It began a long time ago. It simply was interrupted by the lure of achievement, by the belief that once I reach the next milestone, things will feel steadier. And they didn't. Stepping away from this work for a season wasn't about disengagement. It was about honesty, about acknowledging that I could no longer speak about sustainability while living at a pace that completely undermined that. And so I needed to lead myself first before returning to lead any conversation. And so this return to the mission of Mrs. Mummy PhD comes from a different place. So we're talking less about pursuit and more about intention. Less about pushing through and more about self-leadership, because this space still holds ambition. I haven't changed who I am. I am still ambitious, right? But it no longer centers survival as the price of success. Instead, it's about creating ways of living, learning, and leading that honor both achievement and the person carrying it. So after a full 6 months away. My goodness, can't believe it's been that long. I am back to the podcast with some changes. Because yes, I did deliberate over this decision. At times I wondered whether it would just be easier to just walk away from everything Mrs. Mummy PhD and Scholarly Mamas altogether. But there were other times where I would miss connecting with you all in the ways I did before. And what anchored me in this season was that the mission behind Mrs. Mummy PhD and Scholarly Mamas still matters very, very deeply to me. Not the titles, not performance metrics, but purposeful success, the kind that honors ambition and well-being, work and family, achievement and self. And so my return comes from a season of restoration. My mission in this season is even more clear. And that is to help mother scholars lead themselves first and avoid the overfunctioning trap, the one that often masquerades as success but quietly costs us more than it benefits us. So through the podcast, my blog, my coaching, I support women in becoming scholarly mamas. Not as a title to earn or prove, but as a way of leading yourself with intention, depth, and sustainability. So I've updated the podcast trailer. You can go listen to that if you haven't already. I've also refreshed Scholarly Mamas and Mrs. Mummy PhD. Do have a look, have a little browse. But they reflect this evolution even more clearly than ever before. So here's an idea of what's new for Mrs. Mummy PhD and Scholarly Mamas in this season. Firstly, I won't be posting as often. The podcast will move away from weekly episodes to seasons to make it more sustainable. Scholarly Mamas has also moved away from the online community that you once knew toward a purposeful newsletter family that meets you quietly where you are. You don't have to show up. You don't have to turn up and come to co-working sessions and all that stuff. But you can simply read the newsletter in your own time, in your own space. My coaching offer has also changed focus. You can check that out. Because to be honest, these changes don't even scratch the surface of my restoration journey. But that's all I'm going to say for now. So if you've been following me for a while, you'll notice these changes in 2026 and beyond. This space is even more about purpose, presence, and peace, and it's grounded in self-leadership. It's not about doing more. It's not about pushing through at all costs. It's not about chasing this perfect idea of work-life balance. It's about noticing what matters. It's about building routines that genuinely support the life you want. It's about creating impact that includes impact at work, impact at home, and impact on self. Because success without sustainability is not success. We've said this before. It's just survival. And too many of us have been trapped there for far too long. So if you are an ambitious mother scholar navigating intellectually demanding work in academia or beyond, and you feel stretched thin, tired, quietly disconnected from yourself and disconnected from what matters, you're not failing. You're responding to a system that rewards that kind of overfunctioning. And it wasn't built for mamas. But it's possible, I believe at least, it's possible to do things differently. So if you want to join other mother scholars who are taking action and reclaiming their lives, join us inside the newsletter family, Scholarly Mamas the Letter. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a space to be seen without needing to perform or keep up. So if you are ready to move from survival mode to restoration mode, yep, you are in the right place. You can just follow along. I'm sure you'll get something out of this that will help you just think about things a little bit differently. So before I sign off, I just wanted to leave you with 2 gentle challenges for this year. It's a new year, and I want to leave you with 2 gentle challenges. The first one is try making one small decision that reflects how you want to lead yourself in this season, even if that feels uncomfortable. Notice what that feels like. Notice what it feels like to choose alignment over autopilot. Notice how it feels to choose intention and design over default. That is self-leadership in action. The second challenge is, if the search for clarity has been keeping you stuck, if you want to get clearer on what matters and clearer on how you can lead yourself better in this season, what tiny step could you take today, the next tiniest step, without needing to see the whole staircase? This is how our journeys of becoming actually begin. What is the next tiny step? Because that will give you the momentum you need to actually make the change you want. Until next time, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I thank you for being here. I thank you so much for listening, for reading, for reflecting, for just walking alongside me over the past few years. Thank you for being here. It is my pleasure as well to walk alongside you too, because this is the quiet work of scholarly motherhood. I really hope that you'll stick around. If this is no longer your jam, that's okay too. But if it is your jam, if this is your thing, if you want to get on the other side of survival so that you can actually enjoy the success that you've worked so incredibly hard for, then make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. I am so happy to be back. I'm so excited to be connecting here with you again. And thank you again for listening. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening. If something in today's conversation resonated with you, I want you to know this. You don't need to have it all figured out before you take your next step. This work is all about learning to lead yourself first in ways that honor your capacity, your work, your home, and yourself without burning out in the process. If you'd like to continue the conversation beyond the podcast, you're warmly invited to join Scholarly Mamas The Letter, a quiet monthly newsletter for mother scholars who value purpose beyond titles, presence at home, and peace within. You can sign up at scholarlymamas.com. And if you're feeling stuck, stretched, or just not where you want to be, you can book a free 30-minute call to help you gain clarity and explore what support might look like in this season to get from where you are to where you want to be. You can also connect with me on social media at Mrs. Mummy PhD, where I share reflections on ambition, motherhood, sustainable self-leadership, all the things for high-achieving mamas like yourself. This, mama, is the quiet work of scholarly motherhood, and these are our journeys of becoming.